Hi, Ann Bernath here with another entry in my Snippets series where I read excerpts from my books. Today I thought I'd read an excerpt from each of the 7 stories in my short story collection, Season Tales, Stories Inspired by the Seasons. I'm hoping these snippets will give you a glimpse into each story's tone and flavor, and maybe one or more will be intriguing enough to inspire you to read more. So let's start with the first story about Valentine's Day. Margaret and the Valentine Box. So what's the plan? Some part of her, understandably, could hardly believe she was conversing with this elf-like fairy person. But another part, surprisingly, felt it to be an easy and natural thing to do, and that perhaps when she woke up from what was most likely a dream, she would find it all very amusing. She sat up straighter in her desk chair. Well, everyone in class brings a box or bag or big envelope or something, and then we exchange valentines. She held up the valentine she had used to test the slot. But it's really stupid. Is it? He tilted his head. I've found that just because something's stupid doesn't mean it isn't worth doing. Margaret scowled. That sounded very much like something Mom would say. But it's all meaningless. I give a valentine to everyone, and I end up getting valentines from everyone, but they aren't real valentines. You give real valentines to someone you like and tell them how you feel. But this is just exchanging cute pieces of paper as an excuse to decorate a box. Oh, I see you've thought about this quite a bit. So how can we make this more fun? We fairies are all about fun. Valentine stroked his chin. He had a long, skinny beard hanging off the end of his chin, and he stroked that too, all the way to its end. Then he jumped to his feet. Ha! I'll cast a spell that will make all the valentines say what the person who wrote them truly wanted to say. That should prove to be excellent fun. Margaret blinked. Do you mean someone could write Happy Valentine's Day, but instead it would end up saying something like, Your breath stinks? Valentine's rainbow eyes sparkled. Exactly. Next up is the Tuckaway Spring Festival. Lord Ravenwood? Here, right here. Lord Ravenwood bolted to the door and moved Bradley aside. I am Lord Duke Ravenwood. You must be Lady Iris Primrose. What a laughable statement. How could she be any other? She wore a diaphanous gown cinched at the waist by braided vines. Sprigs of baby's breath and yellow and lavender wildflowers adorned her long flaxen curls. Blue-green eyes gazed at him over rose-blushed cheeks. Red and blue butterflies circled her head like a halo. Thick green vines encircled the length of both of her arms and stretched to the ground on either side of her, where the end of each one coiled tightly around a small red and black writhing bundle. Lady Primrose tipped her head in one direction and then the other. Are these, she said, and the vines uncoiled enough to expose 2 pairs of triangle-shaped ears and red eyes, yours? Lord Ravenwood sighed. So there they were. He had taken a quick walk around the ground floor looking for his demons and was just about to send Bradley to check upstairs while he walked among the brambles by the pond and the estate's rear grounds when they had heard the knock on the door. Yes, I'm afraid so. I apologize for any trouble they've caused. Surely you didn't need to bring them home yourself. You could have sent one of your attendants. Lady Primrose glanced over her shoulder toward the street, where 2 young women dressed in similar gowns with flower wreaths in their hair stood, their hands laced together in front of them, watching with wide eyes. My attendants didn't want to touch them. Neither did I, quite frankly. Thus the vines. Lady Primrose released the demons, and Dom and Glom sprang past Lord Ravenwood through the open door the instant they were free. Hyacinth, Daisy, you can come forward now. Bring the crocus pot. Continuing to summer, here's an excerpt from What Elotie Heard Through the Hawthorn. A wrinkle appeared in Elotie's clandestine pastime. 2 wrinkles, to be precise, that walked and talked like knights and carried short swords in scabbards around their waists and knives on their leather belts. She knew they were knights, not necessarily by their dress, since they wore no armor, but because they told her so. She had burst out from behind the hedge, excited to share the latest spoils of her time in the garden, when the 2 had appeared, blocking her way. "Are you all right, Lady Elotie?" Elotie might have been the shortest one in her year, but she had never felt as diminutive as she did now, gazing upward at the 2 tall figures. "Who are you?" She unraveled a persistent twig out of her hair, noting she would need to redo her hair and rebraid it before anyone else saw her disheveled appearance. "Tobias," the tall blonde one said. "Henry," the even taller auburn-haired one said. "But who are you? You aren't students." "No, milady, we're knights. We've been commissioned by your father, Baron Reinhold," Tobias said. She blinked at one, then the other. "To do what?" "To protect you." "From what?" "From whatever troubles may come your way," Tobias said. Henry gestured toward the hole in the hedge from which she had just emerged. "Or trouble you might run into." Elotie swallowed. "But my father is a baron of modest means. Surely he can't afford to commission knights. At least, no knights of any standing." The one named Henry smiled. He had not only found her statement amusing, but judging by the arc of his eyebrow, he also found it oddly fascinating. "We hope we can exceed your low expectations," he said. Another story for summertime, and it's right in title. Only in Summer. I had been attracted to his cowboy demeanor and swagger, the way he pulled his hat on and off his head, the way he smiled when he spoke of the camaraderie he shared with other truckers, whether he had met them in person or just knew them by their CB handles. I loved his bone-crunching hugs in the early days. I sorely missed them. "Is everything ready?" I nodded. The truck's washed and gassed up. I bought snacks and packed an extra cooler with drinks and ice for the road. Our gear is packed and ready for you to load." "You could have loaded up," he said. I shrugged. "You would have just unloaded and rearranged everything." He lifted his eyebrows. "Maybe not." "You always have." He drew his head back. "That can't be true." I didn't continue the argument. He dressed, packed 2 additional pairs of socks into the suitcase. Unnecessary for the beach, I thought, but didn't comment. And pulled both suitcases off the bed and carried them through the bedroom doorway, gesturing with his head toward the calendar on the wall as he passed it. "Been counting the days, I see." I swallowed. I had made tiny X's on the calendar as each day in August went by. I didn't think he'd notice them. He wasn't wrong. I had been counting the days to our trip. But I was anticipating more than just sand and surf and ocean breezes. I had been counting the days until I could stand once again on the wet sand in my bare feet at sunset, while strong arms held me close and my heart raced and warm, salty, wet lips pressed against mine. I was anticipating seeing him again. "Well, as long as they've got cable." Next up, something for the rainy season. Torrent. A fierce gust of wind howled through the trees, and James turned back toward the window, his heart racing. The storm was coming. He could feel its rising power, could see even in the dark of night how the threatening clouds had gathered across the hilltops as it amassed its forces. It was already driving the wind and the rain, and James anticipated the lightning and thunder that would follow. thunder that would clap the night air, then rumble in ever-increasing crescendos across the fields and hills and through the valleys. Still, Meg would sleep through it all. She always did. James stood and crossed the room to the window, pressed his face against the cold glass. The storm was like no other he had ever known. Fierce winds that blew every night, rain that fell every day. It was unceasing. When the storm had first arrived, he and his neighbors had celebrated, convinced their crops would be saved at last from the months of blistering heat that had come before. But that joy turned to dismay as the healing rain turned into a deluge. It had been weeks, and the rain just kept falling. Their fields had turned to mud. The storm had brought something else with it, something only James knew about, something that made him tremble and his heart ache as every bolt of lightning lit the sky. The storm had brought a woman. Autumn makes me think of Halloween. This story is named Marker. I see you there stealing glances at me from the other side of the fire. No need to be shy. You can address me. Yes, I am none other than Rupert T. Blackwell. Impressed, no? Oh, no? You haven't heard of me? You must be very young. Or is it that I'm very old? What you are is transparent. I can see right through you. Are you calling me a liar, sir, or a braggart? I assure you I am neither. Fact is true that I'm a very famous fellow. I'm being literal, Rupert. I can see right through you. You may have been famous once. I'll have to take your word on that. But as I've been telling you for 3 days now, ever since you first appeared at my campfire, you're a ghost. A ghost? What do you mean by that? I mean you were once solid and alive, but now you're not. Finally, the last season of the year brings us to Christmas. This story is called The Trader. He couldn't wait for old Dugan to see what he'd brought this year. Not only had he made a significant profit, he'd had time to do some whittling. He made a flute that didn't sound half bad, and a top that flipped over if you spun it just right. Strange how the tradition started, but every year he and Dugan had a little competition between them, as if success was measured by how much time they each had for whittling. The barn door creaked open. The trader sprang to his feet. Was it the wind kicking up, or... 2 small children stepped into the barn and shut the door behind them, their cheeks and noses red, their blue eyes wide. They were towheads, as his mother used to say, their hair as blonde as corn silk. They stood with their backs planted firmly against the door, and they stared up at him, hand in hand, their eyes as wide as they could possibly be. They appeared to be twins, a boy and a girl. The trader gave them a half smile. Shouldn't you two be in bed? They nodded in unison. We wanted to see you, the boy said. The trader sat back down on his pile of hay. Well, here I am. Now you'd best get back to bed. He stared a moment longer, and then the girl whispered something into the boy's ear. The boy swallowed. We've been good this year, he said. Except for the one time, the girl poked him with her elbow. Good. We've been good. The trader nodded to them. He wasn't much for talking to children. He wasn't even sure how old they were by looking at them. 6? 7? The little girl whispered to the boy again. Again he swallowed, as if every sentence took a certain amount of fortitude. Daddy said Christmas might not come this year. The trader had finished his biscuits and jerky. His horse had finished his feed bag. The long day of traveling had left him wearier than he thought, and it was getting very late. You two run off to bed now. Tomorrow's Christmas, and I've got somewhere to be. So there you have 7 excerpts from the 7 stories from Season Tales, stories inspired by the seasons. I hope one of those little excerpts sounded intriguing. And maybe you want to know what happens next, or what happened before, depending on where the excerpt occurred. Visit my website at readannbernath.com and stay tuned to this YouTube channel for more snippets.